So the Chiefs are not only very well rested as they get ready for the divisional round of the playoffs, but based on the outcome of the AFC wildcard round, this is one of, if not the best situation for the Chiefs as they gear up for a run at a three-peat. I'll get into the reasons why in today's video, as well as several coaches getting interviews, multiple recent roster moves the Chiefs made, and more. But first, how about those? All right, there's a lot to talk about with the wild card round finishing up, minus the Vikings and Rams game that is tonight. There's also a lot of Chiefs news that has taken place over the last few days. For starters, late last week, offensive coordinator Matt Nagy interviewed for the head coach vacancy of the New York Jets. I'm honestly not sure if he gets that position, considering they've interviewed so many candidates, but you never know. Then the Jets also interviewed Assistant GM Mike Borgonzi for their GM opening. Borgonzi also interviewed with the Titans for their GM opening. And if you are unaware, Borgonzi's been a pretty important piece for the Chiefs over the years, climbing up the ranks to eventually become the right-hand man of GM Brett Veach. He supervises and directs the Chiefs' college and professional scouting operations and also plays a big role in the draft, as well as supporting and advising Veach with roster management via free agency, waiver claims, and trades. So there's the possibility that Matt Nagy finds himself elsewhere this next season, and I talked about some potential offensive coordinator replacements for Nagy here in this video if you're interested. But then the Chiefs could also find themselves potentially needing to backfill their important assistant GM position in Borgonzi if he manages to land with the Jets or the Titans. Honestly, both of these teams would do well to try and hire this man, considering he's been helping run arguably the most well-ran organization in the entire NFL. However, the coaching interviews didn't stop there because defensive coordinator Steve Spagnuolo also had 3 virtual interviews on Friday. The Jets were one of them. They're interviewing every Chiefs staff member that's potentially available. But then the Raiders, who fired their head coach and GM last week, also had a virtual interview with Spags, and the Jaguars as well. Coach Spags said in a recent presser that he does have a desire to be a head coach once again, and him virtually interviewing for all 3 of those teams on Friday does indeed confirm that he's at least interested. I have no idea if he lands with any of these teams, but the guy definitely deserves another shot as a head coach in my eyes. I would hate to see him go, selfishly, but would always hope he succeeds unless he's against the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, if he somehow becomes the head coach of the Raiders, I am going to be sick to my stomach over that for years to come. Whatever ends up happening, wherever he ends up going, the 4-time Super Bowl champion Steve Spagnuolo is going to be a valuable asset to that organization, and whoever is the next defensive coordinator of the Kansas City Chiefs is going to have massive shoes to fill. I selfishly, again, hope he stays in KC because the consistency of the coaching staff year in and year out has been an underrated aspect behind the Chiefs' success. Of course, there's a bunch more that goes into the makings of a dynasty since Mahomes took over as QB1, but we all know how valuable Coach Spags has been to this organization. And don't be concerned about the Chiefs staff not being focused for the divisional round or anything like that based on all these interviews they've been having. This was only allowed to happen because they were on their bye week, but no more interviews can happen now until the conclusion of KC's season, which is hopefully not until they win their 3rd Super Bowl in a row. Next up, the Associated Press recently released their All-Pro Honors team on Friday, and this list is decided by a national panel of 50 media members, with these 50 people voting in 4 Chiefs players. 3 of them made first-team All-Pro, with those being left guard or left tackle as needed Joe Thuney, center Creed Humphrey, and defensive tackle Chris Jones. Then cornerback Trent McDuffie was voted as second-team All-Pro, falling behind Patrick Surtain II and Derek Stingley Jr. Some are upset about who or who did not make the list, but there's not much that can be done. I would have obviously loved to see Trey Smith in there. I think he's worth it, and the Chiefs should do whatever they can to keep him around for years to come because he's going to be a free agent at the conclusion of the season. That's a topic for another day. You could also argue in McDuffie as a first-teamer for sure, but I'm still happy for the guys who made it in there. I'm also happy for this fan, William Mashburn, who refused to let another Chiefs cornerback in Jaylen Watson shovel his driveway last week. He said, "No, sir. Do not shovel your own driveway," when Watson took to X to ask for a shovel. Instead, Watson ended up DMing him his address, and William showed up at his house and shoveled his driveway. In return, he got a signed, authentic Jaylen Watson jersey, obviously signed by Jaylen Watson himself, but he didn't do it for that. That was a complete surprise. He just did it to help out a fellow Kansas Cityan, a Chief who has done great things for the team. Then, Chiefs players ended up returning the favor over the weekend when offensive linemen Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith could be seen helping some lady get her car unstuck after all the ice and snow had settled in. On a bye week, this is probably the best kind of content you could ask for. Almost, because the icing on the cake was the Mahomes family announcing the birth of their third child today, and the name is Golden Ray Mahomes. Patrick said after the win on Christmas that his goal was to get a first-round bye secured so they can have their baby before the divisional round of the playoffs, and that is exactly what happened. Now that the baby is here and presumably both she and mom seem to be safe and healthy, Patrick can now focus up on the task at hand this weekend and get that big, fat W. And from here, I need to talk about that divisional round matchup as things look right now, as well as a few roster moves the Chiefs made recently. But first, now that we know the Chiefs take on the Texans at Arrowhead for the divisional round this Saturday at 3:30 p.m. Central, that means it's time to get some tickets to this game ASAP. It's going to be cold, but worth it, so bundle up and take advantage of my special hookup from today's sponsor, SeatGeek. Everyone can use my code HBTC10 and get 10% off any tickets on SeatGeek, whether you are a new customer or not. This includes Chiefs or any other NFL playoff games, as well as other sports, concerts, festivals, you name it. SeatGeek makes the process easy for you by rating tickets on a scale of 1 to 10, so just look for the green dots because that means good, meanwhile red means bad. And no matter how many times you've bought tickets using SeatGeek before, code HBTC10 is gonna get it done. So take out your phone, open up the SeatGeek app, and add code HBTC10 to your account ASAP because this offer is only available for a limited time. All right, on Friday, the Chiefs signed 2 players to a reserve/futures deal. A reserve future contract does not count until the new league year and therefore also does not count against the team's salary cap at the time of the signing. This is common for free agents or players that were on the practice squad of a team whose season is now done. And once they sign a futures contract, they are no longer free to negotiate with other teams, and teams can sign as many players to futures deals as they choose as long as it doesn't put them over the 90-man roster limit that takes effect on the first day of the new league year. And before I say who the Chiefs signed, I do want to note that wide receiver Justin Watson was a guy the Chiefs signed to a futures deal back in February of 2022, so you can't just write off these players completely, can't write them off just yet, because you never know who could end up fighting their way onto the 53-man roster from the 90 before cutdown day, and also potentially be an effective player out there on the field. With that being said, the first player signed was defensive back Jason Taylor II. He's a 25-year-old safety out of Oklahoma State that was initially drafted by the Rams in the 7th round of the 2023 NFL Draft. He was placed on IR around the start of the season and eventually made his way to the practice squad in 2024 before being released, then signed with the Cardinals practice squad. He's had limited NFL experience, playing in just 8 games with the Rams and recording 5 tackles, but he's an athletic guy with a great vertical and broad jump and an elite composite speed grade on his relative athletic score. The second player Casey opted to sign was linebacker Sean Bradley. Bradley was a 6th-round pick of the Eagles in the 2020 NFL Draft, so he's 27 years old, a couple years older than the DB they just signed, and he played for the Eagles for 3 seasons and racked up 45 total tackles during that span. However, he also played 300 snaps or more per season on special teams with the Eagles, according to Jordan Foote of Sports Illustrated. So that's a way he could earn his keep next year by earning the trust of special teams coordinator Dave Toub. That wasn't all the moves made, though, because it was also announced that the Chiefs placed defensive tackle Marlon Tuipulotu on injured reserve. Tuipulotu was on the 53-man roster, playing a decent amount of snaps in the Week 18 finale against the Broncos. Well, he must have gotten banged up, injured in some way, shape, or form in that game, so hopefully he does heal up quick, but with him now being placed on IR, he was on the 53-man roster, and that now leaves one spot available to fill. Well, that most likely means either the return of cornerback Jaylen Watson or wide receiver Mecole Hardman is very near, since both of them have had their 21-day window to return open up. No disrespect to Mecole here, but I think Nico is doing a pretty good job as the team's returner. So if I had my pick of just one of these 2 players, I'm going to go with Jaylen Watson. He would obviously be a huge boost to the secondary, with multiple defensive statistics declining, dropping off once he broke his ankle Week 7 and had to get placed on IR for surgery. However, I think Mecole could be ready to go before Watson. Mecole had a minor knee procedure done, and if Casey opts to bring him back, we will see what they end up doing about the returner position. Do they keep Nico Remigio around, or do they chance waiving him and him clearing waivers and then re-signing him to the practice squad? I would see Mecole as more valuable to the team from an offensive usage standpoint. So if they do opt to have Mecole around, it's got to be because they believe he could be a depth piece guy to use in case of emergency or in some niche ways on the offensive side of the ball. Either way, we should find out here soon who KC brings back, either Mecole Hardman or Jaylen Watson, or maybe both sooner rather than later. On the subject of injuries, Andy Reid shared during his presser with the media on Friday that some key players were back practicing, with those being safety Chamari Connor, who dealt with a concussion a few weeks ago, but also was pulled from the Week 18 game against Denver with a shoulder injury. Then defensive tackle Chris Jones, calf strain, running back Isaiah Pacheco, ribs, right tackle Jawan Taylor, knee, and cornerback Jaylen Watson all practiced on Friday. Watson appeared to look good in his one-on-one reps at practice, moving around well, said Andy Reid. And on top of that, he said that left tackle DJ Humphries is headed in the right direction after playing Week 18 against the Broncos. I had a whole conversation with Seth Kaiser on my channel last week about whether or not DJ Humphries should be left tackle for the divisional round, or should they opt to keep Joe Thuney out there at left tackle. So check that conversation out if you haven't already. But of course, there's a couple plays Andy Reid said DJ Humphries would like to have back. Specifically in the second half of that game, we saw those 2 reps where he lost pretty badly, but we shall see what the Chiefs end up doing. Big Red was non-committal about whether or not he would start at left tackle in the divisional round, and that is of course going to be against the Houston Texans. Joe Thuney played left tackle against them a few weeks ago when the Chiefs faced off against them on December 21st. It was the 3-game and 11-day span that the Chiefs ended up being able to pull off a W in all 3 of them. But this is a game, again, I expect the Chiefs to win. The Texans, though, let's back up and talk about the wild card round, because they ended up beating the brakes off of the Chargers in a game that I thought the Chargers were going to win. But Justin Herbert threw 4 interceptions, which is pretty crazy considering he only threw 3 interceptions all season long heading into this game. If that wasn't enough, Herbert was also sacked 4 times. They only averaged 2.8 yards per carry on the ground, and while Ladd McConkey finished the day with 9 catches for a hilarious 197 yards, it was nowhere near enough. One of Herbert's interceptions ended up being a pick 6, with another one happening on the very next drive that was almost housed a second time and set up a field goal for the Texans. So that's 10 points off of takeaways alone. The Chargers were just 3 for 11 on third downs on top of that. They turned the ball over on downs once and were 0 for 1 in the red zone. The Texans, though, weren't much better on third downs, to be honest, just 5 for 14, but were 2 for 4 in the red zone, and that pick 6 by Eric Murray turned a 6-13 game into a 6-20 game, and ultimately out of reach for the Chargers. Stroud threw for nearly 300 yards and a touchdown with 1, nearly 2 interceptions of his own. He was also sacked 3 times, but Joe Mixon and Nico Collins each had more than 100 yards on the day, and that was more than enough for them to get the clean, decisive W. That means that the Texans are traveling to Arrowhead to face KC in some frigid temps. It's going to be like 10, 15 degrees. Wind chill is probably going to be close to 0, and that's on Saturday at 3:30 p.m. Chiefs are currently around 8-point favorites at the time of this recording, with the over-under set at 42 points. And honestly, I would be pretty surprised if the Chiefs lose this game. This was the ideal matchup, in my opinion, for the Kansas City Chiefs out of the Broncos, the Chargers, and the Texans. I like them more than anybody, so I am getting my wish, and maybe a bunch of you are as well. And to expand on that for a second, I mean, would you really rather play the Chargers for a third time with that defense, that coach? Justin Herbert did kind of soil his joggers on TV, but if I had to pick, I don't really care to pick the Broncos. I don't want to play them again. The Chiefs won by a blocked field goal earlier on in the season. Chargers were both 1-score games. Just did not really want those, but I like the Texans. I do like the Texans. Obviously, it would have been great to have the Steelers, but here's the benefit of the Steelers losing. Ravens win, Bills win, so the Bills and Ravens, they got to duke it out, and then you only have to play one of them if you can move past the Texans. Now, you can't sleep on any team in the playoffs, but they did just beat Houston by 8 back on December 21st, and they kneeled the game out inside the Texans' 20-yard line. That obviously meant the Chiefs could have scored more than the 27 points they had if needed. Mahomes threw for 260 yards and a touchdown. Kareem Hunt averaged 5 yards per carry, and this was also the regular season debut of Hollywood Brown. He caught 5 passes for 45 yards, with Xavier Worthy leading the room on the day, catching 7 for 65. CJ C.J. Stroud was picked off twice, once by Jaden Hicks and then another by Trent McDuffie, and KC was really in complete control of this game. They won the time of possession battle, finished 50% on 3rd and 4th downs, and were 3 for 5 in the red zone. And I think KC pulls off this victory once again. But the details on this game, I'm going to hold off on, and I will cover in a later video when I preview Texans Chiefs in this divisional matchup. But before we get out of here, another AFC West team in the Broncos got annihilated 31-7 by the Buffalo Bills, with Bo Nix and company not scoring anything after their very first drive. Then the Ravens beat the Steelers by 2 touchdowns in a game that was never really close, and that leaves the Ravens traveling to Buffalo with the 2 and 3 seed battling it out on Sunday evening in a matchup that I can't wait to see. The winner of that game will take on the winner of the Chiefs and Texans in the AFC Championship, and if the Chiefs manage to beat the Texans, that means the Chiefs will be hosting the AFC Championship game at Arrowhead. Now, who wins the Ravens and Bills game? I have no idea at this point in time. The Ravens got the best of the Bills earlier on in the year, curb stomping them 10-35. Wasn't even close, but I'm honestly not sure how this one will end up going. Both teams are very good. Both quarterbacks are fighting for that MVP spot. Derrick Henry's great. I mean, there's a lot of good things going on with both of these teams, so we'll have to wait and see, but that is one we are going to have to keep our eyes on. Then for the NFC, the Commanders are traveling to Detroit to take on the Lions immediately after the Texans and Chiefs game on Saturday. Then Sunday before the Ravens and Bills face off, the winner of tonight's Vikings and Rams wildcard battle, the final wildcard game of the weekend, will travel to Philly to take on the Eagles. That means the Commanders did beat the Bucs in a very entertaining Sunday night showdown, and also the Eagles moved past the Packers pretty convincingly, who ended up losing multiple starters to injury during that game. And it's safe to say that I cannot wait for more football this weekend. But with that being said, let me know your initial thoughts on how wildcard weekend went, as well as your thoughts on the Texans traveling to KC in very cold weather to take on the 1-seed Chiefs. The Chiefs will obviously be very well rested and ready to go, but let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. And until next time, let's go. Let's freaking go. How about those?